Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping right into one of the most high-stakes, history-altering conversations ever recorded. I mean, we are traveling straight back to a desert on the absolute brink of tragedy, looking at a profound dialogue between a brother and a sister that literally changed the course of Islamic history forever. The brother is Imam Hussain, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, and the sister is Zainab. Ultimately, this is a story about the raw power of truth. It's about how the survival of a movement wasn't actually secured on a battlefield, but in the devastating aftermath of one. Section 1. The Night Before the End. A Silent Desert.
So, it's the 9th of Muharram. The desert of Karbala is completely silent. But despite the massive exhaustion that had to be weighing on him, Imam Hussain was not sleeping. Instead, he's walking through his camp. He walks past the tents of his children, his nephews, just taking in this eerie quiet before the storm. And then he stops at one tent in particular, the tent of his sister, Zainab. What he told her that night would change everything.
To fully grasp this, you've got to understand the grim physical reality they were facing by the night of the 9th. It was suffocating. Imam Hussain knew the end was near. The massive army of Yazid had completely surrounded their small camp. And even worse, their water supply had been cut off for 3 grueling days. I mean, imagine the desert heat. The children are severely thirsty. The men are utterly exhausted. The physical pressure bearing down on this camp was just unimaginable. But here's the thing. Despite the thirst, the extreme exhaustion, and that massive surrounding army, Imam Hussain wasn't actually afraid of death. That wasn't what was keeping him awake. He was afraid of something else entirely. He was afraid that the world would forget why they died. He was looking at the very real threat of historical erasure. And that, right there, is exactly why he needed Zainab. Section 2. A Mission of Survival. The Tent of Zainab. According to Shia tradition, when Imam Hussain entered her tent that night, Zainab was already awake. She knew what was happening. Everyone in that camp knew. But what actually happened next in that tent is rarely spoken about in detail. Hussain looked at his sister and delivered a truly devastating reality. He said, "O Zainab, tomorrow you will witness something no sister has ever witnessed. You will see your brothers fall, your nephews cut down, your children thirsty, and I will not be there to protect you." He was literally preparing her for the absolute worst. But then, he says something that shattered her, while fundamentally shifting her entire purpose. He told her, "After I am gone, you must not cry for me in private. You must cry for me in the courts of Yazid. You must speak for me when I have no voice. You must become my tum, Zainab, because if you stay silent, they will erase us." It's incredible, really. He's taking the traditional role of mourning and completely weaponizing it against erasure. I want you to just pause for a second and really imagine that world-shifting weight. Your brother, your protector, the grandson of the Prophet is looking you in the eye and telling you that you are going to survive the unimaginable violence of tomorrow. But your survival isn't a mercy, it is a mission. How would you even begin to react to that kind of burden?
Section 3. A Sister's Promise. The Tears of a Martyr.
Well, Zainab, she didn't break down. She didn't beg him to flee or try to escape into the night. She looked right at her brother and accepted this heavy mantle immediately. She said, "Oh, my brother, do you think I would ever betray you? I will carry your message until my last breath." Her steadfastness is absolute. But then she asked for just one thing in return. She said, "But brother, promise me one thing. When you meet our grandfather, the Prophet Muhammad, in paradise, tell him that his daughter Zainab did not let him down." She anchors her own immense personal suffering and the absolutely horrifying task ahead of her directly to the broader legacy of the Prophet Muhammad. She is taking on the sheer weight of history. And upon hearing this, Imam Hussain wept. In fact, historical accounts say it was the only time he cried that entire night. He wasn't crying for himself. He wasn't crying because he feared the death waiting for him the very next morning. No, he cried because he knew the agonizing reality of what he was asking his sister to endure for the sake of the truth. And he cried because he knew she would actually do it. Section 4. The Voice of Truth. From Ashura to Damascus. The devastation unfolded rapidly after that. We start with the night of the 9th, right, where that sacred promise was made in the tent. While the very next morning,
Ashura, the nightmare became reality. Every man in Hussein's camp was martyred. The tents they'd sought shelter in were completely burned to the ground. In the aftermath, the women were taken as prisoners. And ultimately, Zainab, wounded, thirsty, and physically shackled, was dragged all the way to Damascus to stand in the enemy court of Yazid. And it is exactly there, in Damascus, shackled in the court of her enemy, that she fearlessly fulfills her brother's request. She says the words Imam Hussain could no longer say. She told them, "You can kill us, you can burn our homes, but you cannot kill the truth. My brother died so the world would know what you are, and I will make sure they never forget." So that incredibly difficult conversation in the tent on the 9th of Muharram, it was not just a goodbye between siblings. It was the ultimate passing of a torch. It was the literal transfer of a mission from physical resistance, the sword of Hussein on the battlefield, to the preservation of historical memory, the voice of Zainab in the courts of the powerful. Which leaves us with this final thought for the explainer today. Hussein's legacy survived because his sister simply refused to be erased. History is shaped by those who refuse to stay silent when everything is on the line. It really makes you wonder, when you look at the narratives and legacies in your own life, whose truth are you carrying?